Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for this wonderful turnout. Welcome. This is the second year of the AGORA workshop, and we're going to talk about impact strategies. It's a new thing, impact production and impact strategies, but we need to know what this thing does. So, lovely Gugi Gumilang, the program director of Indocs and film programmer at HotDocs, he's going to navigate us, and thank you so much Mudamba and Abisan for joining us. Before we start, I would like to really thank from the heart Momus Photography Museum of Thessaloniki for offering us this wonderful venue. We're really happy to be back here again. And speaking of Momus, while you're here, there is a lovely exhibition, it's called About Humans. So, I mean, you'll be wondering about, so just walk in and have a look. It's going to be lovely. So I'm going to pass the floor to Gugi. Enjoy the workshop. I can't hear you.
Angeliki, you don't want to say something, right? No. Okay, cool. So welcome everyone. I'm really happy to lead this workshop / panel about impact strategies. I think the idea behind of this event is basically we try to dive more, or also to encourage, especially for the filmmakers who want to start to think about impact, how to use your film not only in the conventional distribution way, but also to think more how can you use this film to create social movement or social change. I'm really happy that we are also, I'm happy not talking alone basically, because Mudamba is also here, which is he's doing a lot of impact works in Kenya for a lot of years, but not only in Kenya, but also East Africa especially. And Abisan from IDA, which gave a lot of support for the filmmakers who wants to do impact, and then also try to strategize how filmmaker can think about or integrating impact into their application, or to the funder perspective basically. We're gonna have round of introduction first, because I think it's important to know what I did before. So as you can see that I'm the program director for Indocs. Indocs is non-profit organization based in Jakarta, Indonesia. But before that I was joining Indocs, I was actually working for UN, UNICEF in Kenya. Maybe I haven't told you about this. So my job in UN was trying to create a communication strategy, how we use audiovisual for impact for issue campaign basically. So terms of impact terms in the film industry is kind of new. It's, I think, I just knew about the impact terms maybe for the past 10 years, but actually a lot of people are doing that already before. They just don't have this term. So that's also why that I tried to talk more about how my previous job also really related how to use audiovisual media for the campaigning a certain issue and so on. Even though I didn't use documentary film at that time, I'm using more photography essay, and then I did a lot with the community in Kenya for a photo exhibition, impact workshop, and so on. But I think the idea of using this medium to campaigning certain issue to the community is the best way. And documentary is one of the most effective way to talk about this actually, to campaign your issue, what kind of change you want to do and so on. So after that, I was when I moved to the film industry 14 years ago, I try also being balanced between the industry of film in the conventional way, but also try to do more like impact producing, which is like I did for 2 films back in 2016 and 2020. And I'm gonna share also like about this in my one of my case study that I'm gonna speak like more about it after. And then like when I joined Indocs, it's an organization that like really focusing on how can we use film, like, but at the same time like intersection between the conventional distribution but also like the impact distribution and so on. So that's why like we created like Impact Lab since 2017. That's like the first time that we also like work with the society as well. And then also like that's why like we connected with DOCUBOX in Kenya, also like with DocXP, Ambulante in Mexico, and also Aflamuna in Lebanon. So that's like the organization like we are connected with, and then we also try like to share more like how we work, because like every region has like different strategy like to use impact for using film, because I think that's like the main point as well, because in the end of the day, I think like you know better about your community, about your region and so on. So I think like what we are trying to do now, like maybe you can take like a bit what we did before, and then maybe like you can apply it. I mean, if it's like fit into your region, then you can apply it, and if you don't, you know like better. So I think that's the idea, like to give these options, how to use film more in a broader way. So that's my short introduction. Then I'm gonna pass the mic first, like to Mudamba. Like maybe you can tell a bit like about yourself and what you are doing with DOCUBOX.
Let me just be quite brief and say that we've been in existence for over 11 years, since inception in 2013, and through that time, we've actually been able to produce quite a number of films, but I think in 2018 is when we delved deeper into impact and the impact of films. And because of that, I'll just say that I was initially the programs director at DOCUBOX. Right now, I'm the general manager at DOCUBOX. But having been the programs director for 10 years, it gives me the opportunity to talk quite deeply about impact. And as Gugi said, quite a number of us have actually been practicing impact, but not really understanding that it is really impact. And I think the only thing that we'll be able to do is to share a bit of ideas of what you've done with feature-length documentaries, but I'll give a case study on short factual films, and I hope that through those insights you can be able to exchange and talk more about this thing, impact, and why it's important to plug it in very early in the development of documentaries. So let's talk more when we get there. Thank you. I pass it on to Amy. Yes.
Hi, I'm Abby Sun. I'm currently the programs director, essentially, at IDA, the International Documentary Association. And IDA is an organization that is 42 years old, and we are a 360-degree service organization for documentary filmmakers. So over the course of IDA's history, we have had some funds for impact work for creative documentaries. That fund is currently on pause, though, so but you can look it up. But also, we, aside from being a funder, we also run educational workshops for documentary filmmakers, including on what we now term impact producing. But what I'll be talking about is a initiative primarily in the US, called the core application, because that application, like many other applications or ways, things you might put together to communicate what you want your film to be about to potential funders, ask about impact. And impact doesn't necessarily mean what we term impact producing. There's many ways a creative documentary can be impactful. So I'm hoping to talk a little bit about that difference. Before IDA, I was a film festival programmer, so I will just say, if you're trying to make a creative documentary and not a short factual, like what Mudamba was talking about, there's a home for you in the impact world as well.
Thank you. Before I'm gonna start like with my presentation, I'm just gonna like kind of like sum up like what are we gonna like how is the structure of the panel like for today. So like basically I'm gonna present my point of view about this session for around like 30 minutes and so on, and I'm gonna try like to cover like all the basic knowledge on how to start like to think about it, like if you want to do like impact in your film and so on, and then like give like a bit like a teaser about like the case study that I did before, like really briefly, because like Mudamba gonna present like more like in the practical way, which is like what he did also like with the DOCUBOX did in terms of doing their impact in a specific case study. And then like we're gonna have the coffee break afterwards. And then Abby will talk about like from the funder's perspective and also like around like the application, like in an impact kind of like element like in your application. And then we're gonna have also give a chance for the audience, like if you want to have like a question like for us and so on. So are you ready? All right, okay. So I'm gonna start. Okay, this is the title again. Right, so like, because I'm doing kind of both, like what I meant about like both is more like why this industry is kind of like divided. So like if you go like to film festival, a lot of them like, okay, this like the impact kind of event, and then there's like the industry event and so on. It's there's like a lot of kind of division, like how they work together, but at the same time, like I don't feel so. I think it has to be like integrated, because I think like the good thing about like documentary, like for example, that like from my region, most of them like the documentary comes from like activism, but at the same time, like how we use like this form of like documentary like to be effectively work in terms of like impact campaign. Abby mentioned a bit about like creative documentary and versus maybe like factual documentary, which this is also like the problem of a lot of like international organization or like NGO, because they tend to use maybe like more like factual documentary like to work like with the impact campaign and so on. But at the same time, like for me personally, this is like my personal opinion, I think creative documentary has more to offer in terms of relating to the audience. I think like the creative documentary has so many layers that you can build up like more empathy, which is, I think it will be last longer in terms of effect of the impact itself, because like you kind of bring like the audience like to feel that, oh, okay, like I kind of feel like about this film. Like I think like we try like to provoke them, or like provoke the audience like to think more, what can we do like regarding this issue and so on. So I think that's like the beautiful of like creative documentary, who can touch like so many layers compared to like giving this like one-way information that like sometimes also like works, but also like at the same times like it's much more effective like to put like this or to convey this message like in the longer effect or like period and so on. So like I feel also that I think like what I'm trying to do as well, like to encourage a filmmaker not like be overwhelmed, like you have to do impact and so on. I think like the first step, it's really important, like just like to ask yourself first as a filmmaker, like identifying your film, what kind of like issue that you're trying like to bring, like how big is like the issue, or like how known is the issue in the society, whether maybe like you are bringing climate change, which is like people like already know, but like how to find a way like to find the audience, how to set up the impact goals and so on and so on. That's why like I'm in this event. I'm trying like to be more I don't know, more basic maybe. Like it's because I think it's important like to start from yourself, like to ask yourself first, and also like to try like to strategize. Oh, okay, maybe I have a partner in this community if I want to reach out in this community and so on. So that's like what I'm gonna talk about like in this session. But at the same time, I mean, for us, for the whole society, I mean, we always need your work. I mean, we need your creative storytelling because in a lot of ways, like to shift the narrative that maybe like in some countries that like we are like limited like to talk about like a certain issue, or maybe there's like censorship and so on. So that's why I think like documentary film like can have like this way like a way around it, like to reach like a certain target audience that you want to achieve, and also to think about like your story could be part of the movement. So not only the moment. So like there's a movement and then there's a moment. So what I call movement, it's try like to invoke people like who wants to do more change. But like moment, maybe like, okay, I'm gonna show it in a festival. I'm gonna show it in cinema and so on. But that's, I mean, to be fair, that's also like, I'm not gonna force like anyone to do anything, but like to start like to think that like, I think like I can create like a movement and so on. I think that's the starting point that like you have to, you can like ask yourself and so on. And I believe on that combination between conventional distribution and the impact distribution could be like satisfying, because like I have seen it and I've done it as well for the case study that I did. So it's, yeah, I think that's, for me, I really believe there's always like intersection between the independent storytelling and the social justice campaign. It's, for me, I think that's always like the case, because as I said, like the conventional distribution sometimes like is really limited like to the certain period of time, you know, like this festival life, maybe like only 2 years and so on. But I think like for the social justice campaign, you can do it like for basically like forever, whether like it's the issue is always like relevant and so on. So, I cannot, oh yes. So this is, I kind of sum up or like created like a list of questions that I feel is like necessary like to ask yourself basically. It's kind of like a practice like for you. It just, you don't have to like execute it already, but I think this is like the first step that like you kind of always like start to ask whether what change do I want to my story like to create? For instance, like whether certain type of community, or like maybe like you want more like ambitious plan, like, oh, I want to change the policy, for instance. So this is like always for you like to be to understand like more like in which level that you want to go and so on. And then also like who needs to see my story, and then how will I reach them? And this is like more about like, okay, like targeting your audience, or like what kind of community that you want to change. And also like, okay, who are the partners that I can work with, for instance. And how should I start my story with others? This is also like the regarding like choosing partners. Maybe there's like partners like NGO who are deal with the issue already, and then like how you negotiate with them to use your film like with them and so on. And how does my story fit into what's happening in society today, and what chances do I have and problems might I face. This is also like identifying your strength, whether like your issue is already known, or like if there's like if your opposition also like already a lot. So I think like try to identify basically like the surrounding of your strength of your film, and who can spread my story and its message again with the partnership, and what do people working on this issue really need. What action should my audience take after experiencing my story? And then how will my story continue to make a difference long after its release? And what helps and tools do I need to make all this happen? So this is like part of like the question that I try like to sum up that like you can get started with. I think it's not. I think it's not like hard way to do it, but like I think like just to start like to answering by this question, I think it's gonna really help you like if you want to move like in a bigger process, or like you want to make like a small impact and so on. So this is what I'm trying to. So in those questions, I think the idea this is like a one step further than answering those questions. This is how we set your goals basically. So there's like a 4 goals that actually I mean I talk a lot with the Doc Society as well, because like they form like this beautiful impact field guide, which actually like from my point of view is not for everyone, because it's really a lot. I think it's like more than 100 pages and so on. But at the same time, it's not gonna be applied at the same thing as your film. So I think the idea is like really, I mean, if you have time, you can also like read that. But I think it's really good like to start basically, because like it's really comprehensive like guide like to start like doing impact. But at the same time, I think like you are like the one like who drive your film, because like you know better the cultural barrier, the community itself, like in your target audience, for instance. So there's like 4 of the goals, which it's kind of like dynamics. That's why I put it like dynamics words. It's not like you set it and then you have to do it in the right way. I think there's no right way, because it's always like really, it's always a really flow. Like you can choose like two goals basically, like whether like you are trying like to changing thoughts of certain communities and so on, or you want to do more. It's really depends on your strength of your film as well. Like as I said before, whether like the issue is already known, for instance like climate change. Oh, we already have like a society. I mean, most of the people, they already know like about the issue itself. So maybe like raising or like changing thought is not effective as you thought. Maybe like you want to do more, like you want to maybe like building communities, or like maybe like try like to change the behavior of your target audience to have like call to action. Yes, call to action. Try like to bring them like, okay, like I want to do something like after I watch this film. So that's like this is like all the goals, and also like the last one, changing structures. This is like the much like more bigger. It means like you go to the policy maker, or like policy. This is like the goal, like you want to change the policy in the country, for instance, or like in the local government. So this is also like the way that like you have to identify who's gonna be a partner for this one. But there's like also another way that sometimes I'm gonna start with changing the structure first. That's like my goal. But in the process, like you felt that, wow, this is like too complicated. Maybe like in, for instance, like I will choose in my country that like in Indonesia, oh, the bureaucracy is too complicated. The local government is it's impossible like to change and so on. So you can put like you can like step down your goals basically. So it means that it's really dynamic. So like you can always be flexible with it as well. And also like I want to challenge, like this is also like what I do like sometimes like with the filmmakers that want to start like doing impact. I try like to challenge them as well, like to think more about like your audience, because like most of the filmmakers that I ask, okay, like do you have any like targeted audience like for your film and so on? Oh, I think like everyone should see this. Great. I mean, that's a fair answer, but I think like I want to challenge like more of that. Like, you know, like I think like how to go beyond everyone should see this. I think like this is also like I'm creating like some question, like who really needs your message like urgently, like which community and so on. I think that's like the start, like to think about like this beyond kind of everyone should see this, but it follow up with the strategy. So like it's also means that like you have to kind of build up a strategy of audience. Whether going back from my point in the impact goals before, that like really like who want you like which certain of target groups that like, you want to change. It's not always a bit. You don't always have to go big. I mean, of course, like a lot of people like wants to have like this changing policy and so on, but even like some certain of community that you feel that like you can create impact or like to change or like create like a social movement and so on, that's already like enough. I think because also like I don't want to overwhelm like the filmmakers, because sometimes filmmaking is not an easy journey. I mean, you're making feature-length documentary for 7 years, and then sometimes like, oh, I already like finished this film, like why do I have to do more? I mean, I got like a lot of this kind of answer as well, which is like totally fair. But like I'm trying here, like I think there's always like potential like to do more and so on. And this is the thing that like I'm just gonna give it to you guys, the option whether like you want to do it or not. Yeah, so like following on that note, I think to start small is always like really good. As I said, like I think focusing on the key group first, and then like maybe if you want to take it like more to the policy level, then like you can also like do that. And yes, of course you cannot do it by yourself. You always need partners. This is also like basically like the partners that maybe like you can work with. You can always like do like some research about it, about like, okay, maybe like people directly affected by about the issue and so on. Maybe there's like the communities already like doing it, about working with the issue and so on. I think this is like your skill also to negotiate with your partners. Like how are you gonna use the film like for the certain communities, whether maybe, I mean, this is also like what I heard, like community screening is like one of the way, but also I think I also just want to push more than like community screening. Not maybe, okay, I mean, I'm filming about this community, I'm just gonna show like the film to them and so on. But maybe you can invite like some people like who understand like more about the issue. I think like the idea of like community screening or like / impact screening is not talking about the film per se, but like talking about the issue like in the film. I think that's like the two things that like sometimes people kind of like confused about it. So I'm just gonna like this festival round and maybe like broadcast and so on. I'm gonna do community screening, but I think like community screening, you have to like think a bit more about that as well, because I think the idea, like talking about like the issue that you brought up like in the film, not the filmmaking itself. I'm just gonna display this really quick because I also want to get to know more like about the case study. I think it's also gonna be like really helpful. But like if you need the slides, like I will be happy like to distribute it as well. Okay, the case study. So this is like a teaser before like we going to Mudamba. That's gonna do more like a case study, like really in depth. This is actually the film that like I was the impact producer at that time. It was really, yeah, it was really. I didn't have like a lot of. I think at that time like I didn't really use like impact field guide as well. I think like I did use my experience more like when I used to work in the international development. So like it was like really kind of like rough, but like this is the actual first draft that I made for the film, like that I proposed to the filmmakers. I think this is like the how I see the film and how I identify like the strength of the film and how I identify like the target groups that we want to change, and how I identify like the partners who I want to work with and so on. So this is like really initial impact campaign plan, basically. So like to get to know, I think I want to play the trailer first, so like you got like the context like better. So can you play the trailer, please?
Gini loh, tuh kayak orang sholat, tapi nggak boleh nempel. Nggak boleh melotot. Sip. Senyum lagi, kelihatan giginya boleh.
Ani Sumeri.
Ani Sumeri. Mau kemana Mbak Ani?
Mau ke Taiwan.
Bulan ini masa uji coba. Makanya kalian jangan kaget nanti kelomboh ininya sama tai, tangan, apa, bau-bauan nih, jangan
Dulu sih iya, saya berapa bulan tuh nangis terus. Saya pakai mukena tuh. Katanya, mama ada pampir, dia bilang gitu. Ih buset, saya bukan pampir kata saya. Tapi udah sama mem nggak boleh. Kamu nggak boleh sholat katanya. Anak saya takut katanya kamu sholat.
Asyhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Hayya 'alas shalah, hayya 'alal falah. Qad qamatis shalah, qad qamatis shalah.
Iya, yang nggak ngerti tanya apa? Kita tanya sama Mbak. Sama Google.
Apa kan janda kok widow? Iya kan.
Video, coba ya, coba penasaran ya.
Apa bahasa Inggrisnya janda?
Oh iya benar,
iya.
berarti widow.
Apa bahasa Mandarinnya aku sayang kamu?
Wani. Iya.
So this trailer is actually, so we made it really specific like for the fundraising for the impact campaign. So it's not like the actual trailer like for the film in the festival route. I think like the idea in the beginning that like we are, when I see like this film is really promoting the safe migrant process because I think especially like Indonesia, like we exported like a lot of migrant workers to Taiwan, to Japan, and then like the countries in MENA region, for instance. And most of them, not most of them, but like quite high numbers, they were, for instance, like got scammed or they didn't get a job in the end, like they the way that they promised in the beginning and so on. So we are trying like to promote this idea like how to create the safe migrant workers process in the country in Indonesia. And then in the beginning, like what we want to try to do is working with the government in the national level, like to try to change the policy because these migrant workers has to go to the certain training center that's set up by the government, so like an official training center before they got sent out to the countries they're going to work for. In the middle of the process, I think like after 3 months and like 4 months, we couldn't get into the government. It was so hard like to work with the government in the national level. It's really long. So like we try like to maybe like we should try to approach the local government. I think the idea was changed, and that in the middle of the process that maybe if we just make this film as an educational material for this training center, I think we already made like some huge progress in this case. Maybe like make them as an obligatory educational material. So like before they go do the migrant work like in other countries. So we did that, and then we try like to partner with some NGOs like in Indonesia to work with us like to push more like the local government. So in the end, we actually reach our our goals. So like, I mean, if you set up like this campaign, this plan, you have to find also the how to measure it and so on. So in the end, like we basically work with the around five local governments in the province, and they have like this around like 30 plus official government training center that they really use this educational material as part of their curriculum to send the migrant workers. And this is like the change that like we want to do. And then I think we achieved it, even though like we couldn't change like the whole national policy, but I think this is already like the most visible way that we can do it. And then like afterwards, like there's like a possibility because the migrant workers who got sent to the Taiwan and those countries, they talked to the other migrant workers, and they felt like, oh, now we got this like film now like in the training center like before we came to this country, and then they talked to their migrant communities in other countries, and then afterwards like they reach out to us, hey, can we also like screen this like in our communities and so on. So like in the end, like we have like a global reach as well. So which is like we didn't think about that before. So that's why like I said like in the beginning, I think the impact dynamics is really real. So like it's always they have like always like a development that maybe like you try like in the beginning in this case, but like afterwards like, oh, now we are like the global reach, this is also like really surprising. And then we collect like all the data. I think like we have the migrant workers, like 500 migrant workers community like screen this film and so on. So that's like the teaser about like what I did before. So just like to get the idea that like you can always like start small. You can always like start really in the key audience that you want to do. But in the end, like you can always like really develop it and so on. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it to you, Mudamba. Maybe you can give more about what is happening in the region.
Before we play the trailer that is about DOCUBOX, I want to pose a question, because that's what the case study will be about. So you are in a space where sex or sexual reproductive health rights issues don't have a space where they should be discussed. When you ask schools to talk about them in Kenya, they say that's not the space for that to be discussed. It's wrong for sex to be taught in schools. When they push it to the church says, why should we be talking about sex in churches? Sex should be talked about maybe at home or with whoever. At home, the parents will say, this should be talked or taught in schools. So if you don't do that, where do the kids turn to? That's what we'll be dealing with. Let's show the DOCUBOX show reel.
DOCUBOX is an organization that was created by filmmakers for filmmakers.
The programs that we started off with initially, mainly being able to give funds to feature-length documentary filmmakers. We now have the box, which deals a lot more with experimental short films, fiction films, and the like.
For me, I found my calling because DOCUBOX, they've allowed me to be able to tell good stories, and those stories then be used as a tool to make a change.
They took a chance on me who had no background and said, you know what, let's teach you.
So that's about DOCUBOX, but today I want to talk about impact plans, goals, strategies for the Get Real project, a project that was dealing with the case studies on sexual reproductive health rights and justice in the East African region. So it didn't only deal with issues in Kenya, but there was Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi all put together. I want to also just focus a bit of this to take us back to some of the things that we've done before on impact with Filamudada films, which were women films made by 7 women filmmakers following 7 women leaders in Kenya, because there was a need to just look at how do Kenyans treat women politicians and how do they fare. And that story was able to follow these 7. And interestingly, 7 of them got into legislatures, governors, MPs, women reps, and all of them were able to go through. And that is being used as a case study for people in the East African region. We've had Follow the Leader. If you've been following politics in Kenya, you'll notice that the Gen Zs have risen so much, and the politicians are trying very hard to suppress them. And we have taken this opportunity to use these films to show the Gen Zs that they are on the right path. They should follow their leaders and see how it can move on. We've had climate justice films. But beyond that, we also had Thank You for the Rain, which is a very impactful film, which was a climate justice film, which went on to build an earth dam in the space where it was made, because it was a semi-arid place, which is now taking care of around 300 families. That's the impact of a film where the government, you find monies for dams and the like at times end up in corrupt manners. The letter, which has been used as a tool to suppress the killing of elderly people on the coastal strip of Kenya. And then there is, I'll go to a film like I Am Samuel, which was banned in Kenya because it was talking about gay relationship. But that film has become so instrumental in being able to bring conversations, because the gentleman who made this film wanted discussions happening in families about these issues that are very difficult to deal with. But then that film is about a relationship between a son and his father, a son who's gay and his father who is a pastor in the church. And towards the end, you see the distance thinning and things becoming interesting. And that has become a conversation. Even though it's banned in Kenya, it's become an interesting one, which is used for conversations. Our Land, Our Freedom is a big film that is historical. How to Build a Library, opened at Sundance. It's just a big about education. Battle for Laikipia, etc. So it's important, as we now focus on Get Real, to actually realize that there are quite a number of impactful films that have come through the support of DOCUBOX. Let's see the show reel, the trailer.
Are you seeing other people?
No.
Cynthia.
Girl. Unakaa familia?
Bas. Naomba unifikishe kilele.
Nataka kwenda home sahi.
So good wapi unaenda? Can you just talk?
Getting me wrong, Jackson. It's not that I don't trust you. I just want us to be safe.
I was born in 2008. Now it was shameful to me when people are asking me like that.
This is the reason why people kill men, that it might just be achieved by stabbing this man.
Mama ana mimba. Ilibaki miezi miwili tufunge ndoa na mwenzio. Mwanao bado ni bikra.
Ngariba ndio mwanamume, Nyakanga mwanamke.
Hapana, wewe ni mke wangu na ni jukumu langu mimi kukuridhisha. Niko radhi mimi nipoteze uhai wangu, alimradi nafsi yako iridhike.
So in Get Real, we were getting real. And sorry to take you through languages that you are not able to understand, because the films were meant to be done in the local languages. And there are films that were done in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. And quite a bit of them were done in their local languages, and therefore the reason why. But sexual reproductive health rights and justice, in East Africa, discussions around this are often and have remained confined to SRHRJ actors circles, making it difficult for the wider public to engage in these crucial issues. Our aim was to make sure that the public gets connected and starts discussing this. And despite the challenges, advocates have relied on community outreach meetings and the media campaigns to push their messaging forward. However, there's a growing interest in the potential of film as a powerful medium to enhance these efforts. And one of the voices of the films came from a person who says, SRHRJ films can serve as educational tools, providing audiences with accurate information. Remember, I said this is not being discussed at the educational level, but it can be used, and the films can become tools in educational spaces. They can debunk myths because communities don't talk about these issues. They think it's not possible to talk about it. They can clarify legal rights and showcase available resources. Why we go into those areas is because you find that some of the films that we deal with are, for example, centered in Muslim community spaces, and the kind of education that goes on in the Muslim community space, you'll be surprised, is quite deep. And that's where Unyagoni comes and becomes really strong. Let's move on. So what was the impact goal for the Get Real films? Get Real project was to influence public support for reproductive health rights, policies, programs, and safe sharing circles in the East African region. Why? Because we wanted to make sure that we are able to influence public support for reproductive health rights issues. The plan was achieved through first level and second level, a creative kitchen and impact screenings. The idea of the creative kitchen was to bring the story bearers, people who have gone through rape, people who have gone through whether it is FGM, female genital mutilation, people who have gone through gender-based violence, etc., to be in the same room with the creators, to listen in on the stories and then decide how these stories will be able to be carried on and to be taken into films and to be created in such a manner that the discussions can become alive and be used in the screenings. And the film screenings were supposed to be end up to disseminate these films at community, national, and global levels in collaboration with key stakeholders. The communities needed these films because these matters of sex are not really deeply entrenched in the communities. Some talk about them in a hush-hush manner, but there are those who actually even show how you should be able to satisfy your spouse. And therefore, these kind of films could end up being used in spaces where it's taboo to talk about the matter and other spaces where the matter is quite openly discussed and the like. There are spaces where you find a child is born out of a rape relation, a rape. What then happens and how does the kid grow up? And that is a bit of the source of the discussion of before 16. You'll be able to find those kind of discussions becoming important at community level. What about this woman who is able to find herself face to face with a person who she feels was the perpetrator of a rape to her? What happens? So these examples I'm giving would end up looking like they are quite wide stroke examples, but they can be used very specifically to become impactful, and you can actually come up with impact goals right from the beginning. And therefore bringing the story bearers and the storytellers and the filmmakers in one room starts the process of having the impact goals, and having the impact producers in the space starts making us think through what is it that you want to change, what is it that you want to happen, how do you want communities to react, and how do we grow the space so that at the end of it all, there is something that will happen around sexual reproductive health, rights, and justice. Next slide. So the Creative Kitchen, we talked quite a bit about how it happened. We began with an open call. The filmmakers submitted their texts and their videos. They came in, and there was the people who were offering the stories, and then there was creative direction and aspirations. Then many of them sought to refine their craft, the filmmakers, and they were eager to tackle complex and deeply personal issues, particularly with the cultural sensitive context. They aimed to create narratives that were thought-provoking. That was the basis of bringing in the filmmakers into the space. A Tanzanian filmmaker said, "I plan to explore a story that reminds people in our African communities to understand their boundaries when it comes to sexual and reproductive health rights of their loved ones." And this is the result of the film Unasemaje, which I'll show you a small clip of, and you'll be able to understand, yes, indeed, there are spaces which are not very easy to deal with. The selection process, 8 teams were selected from Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. Competitive selection from 20 applicants. The DOCUBOX team undertook a rigorous selection process, carefully reviewing each submission before an independent panel of advisors. This then made the final call. In the end, 8 filmmaking teams emerged, and the 8 short films were made. Below are 3 films, but we'll only show snippets of 2, which will then give you a bit of an idea of how deep this can be when a child is born out of rape, and then another issue around a pregnancy that may not be wanted. Let's show the clips, please. Thank you.
Now, when you were searching on some of the videos, and I was just like seeing my mother, and then I remember that day, hizo maandishi za hapo chini nikaona imeandikwa a victim of rape. I was just like, this is my mom. Wakaona. Now people are like, are you born out of rape? Now it was shameful to me when people are asking me like that.
I was still a child, a minor. I was introduced into a world that was unknown to me. I had to look for a job. I didn't have an idea. I just wanted to be free of what I was going through. I had to start taking care of a child that I didn't expect, I didn't look for. All I know is that I'm not where I used to be. One of my biggest fear is to lose my child, any of my children. Yep.
That's mother and daughter, and you can see how that would actually end up becoming a very deeply engaging discussion in schools and at times in communities. The next one, please. Just 2 minutes.
Somo. Mmepanga kuniambia saa ngapi nini kinaendelea?
Mama. Si ndo kwanza unafika jamani, utaambiwa. Usijali babu, itakata hiyo sasa hivi. Mama ana mimba.
Baba, ilibaki miezi miwili tufunge ndoa na mwenzio. Ina maana umeshindwa kuvumilia? Kweli?
Sio Yusufu.
Mungu wangu. Mama, umefanya nini? Somo, tulikupa binti yetu Mfunde kwa sababu tunakuamini. Kwa nini umeruhusu kukutana na mwanaume?
Mwanao bado ni bikira.
Mbona mnanichanganya? Nini kinaendelea?
Mama, hebu jishikilie. Unataka nani mwingine afahamu kinachoongelewa huko ndani? Iko hivi. Mamu ameota atapata ujauzito bila kukutana na mwanamume. Na kweli nimempima. Ana mimba lakini hajawahi kukutana na mwanamume. Nilikuita wewe na Yusufu ili tujadili nini cha kufanya. Kwa kuwa umechelewa, mimi na Yusufu tushajadili. Baba, endelea. Niendelee. Asante. Yusufu amesema anampenda sana mama. Yuko tayari kuifanya hii mimba siri na yuko tayari kufanya mipango ya kumuoa, lakini wasiwasi wake wakijua analea mtoto si wake itakuwaje? Kuna mtu namfahamu yuko Bagamoyo. Katika kujadili tumeona Yusufu na mama waende huko ili katolewe ile mimba.
Mungu wangu. Somo, unazungumzia swala la kutoa mimba kama unameza mate?
Mama, huko si muda kulingisha utakatifu wako. Mtoto utamkosa. Chini,
so there you are. A pregnancy that is not through a relationship. But how do you navigate that if you are in Tanzania and you are on the coastal side of Tanzania and there is supposed to be a discussion in matters that at times are not fully discussed. So mentorship, messaging and the impact, crafting engaging, educational and accessible films on SRHRJ required more than just technical skills. It demanded a deep understanding of lived experiences. And these lived experiences were experiences that people talked about, shared about, and then they were created into films. The mentor, Khalid, said, filming isn't just collaborative, it's about humility and patience. The filmmakers were honest with each other and patient. And that's how these films were made. Move on to the next. So the Get Real Impact screenings happened. We were able to ensure that the films were not just seen, but felt, shared, and also remembered. Get Real took a thoughtful and expansive approach. The films premiered simultaneously in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. The filmmakers needed to see this happen, and it happened. A partnership with one of the TV stations, Media Max in Kenya, then also brought these stories and conversations into homes through a 4-part nationwide broadcast, while digital screenings allowed viewers near and far to engage with the films and their at their conveniences. The reach was remarkable. 3 million viewers watched the films via broadcast. About 3,000 individuals attended screenings in person, and 320 viewers streamed the films online. Real impact. Let's go to the final slide. And therefore, when it comes to changing perspectives from the new responses, the responses on new perspectives for Get Real films, those who felt that there was no new perspective were only 7%. Those who felt that maybe there was a new perspective were 3%. But those who felt no, it was 1%. But those who felt that there was real new perspective out of these films, having watched the survey, was 92%. So if you can gauge a 92% view from those who watched and expect, as an example, that out of the 3 million, maybe 90 or even 70 or even 60% of those have changed perspective, then you've done really impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Mudamba, for such a inspiring activities that you did. So the next we're gonna have the founder's perspective from Abby, but like before that, we're gonna have like a small coffee break, around 10 to 15 minutes. And then, yeah, so let's do it now, and then like we're gonna come back in 50 minutes. All right, welcome back. I hope you had a good coffee. As I mentioned, I think a bit in the beginning, I think like I believe also this intersection between industry and like impact kind of element, and especially I've been lucky like to be a reader for such a great major fund like IDA, Enterprise Fund, and also like Chicken and Egg and Infaberta Fund. And I think like not the trend, but like I think like the past few years, you kind of also have like to fill out like in the form that how your impact distribution kind of look like in one of like the requirement like to apply for a fund. So this is the time that like we can get really good insight from Abby-san that you can share about your experience about this. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Gugi. So I have now on screen, so these are the two questions on the second version of the core application. So the core application is a project of IDA, the International Documentary Association, and the Sundance Institute Documentary Film Program. So what we attempted to do was to try to standardize the grant applications that you might have from organizations in North America. But these are pretty similar questions. I've also read applications for IDFA Bertha Fund and IDFA Forum and for different forums all around the world. And there is generally some sort of question about impact now. But okay, so these two questions, the first question, so these are the two questions with the word impact in them, but you'll see that they're really different. So the first question, intended impact, and it was supposed to be up to 500 words. So you'll see this in use a lot still. The way that impact is used in this question is pretty similar to what we actually have heard about from Gugi and from Mudamba. So this question asks, articulate your vision for the influence or impact you hope the film will have on the participants, community, and or broader society, be the social, cultural, political, or otherwise. What is your impact strategy and goals if you have determined them? If not, what steps are you taking to develop an impact campaign? Whose interests will your film serve and who will benefit and how in both its production and distribution phases? So we did get a lot of feedback that this question was really confusing because it also assumes that every film will have an impact campaign specifically, which was not the behind this application. But I do think this question is also still very good because it outlines that impact can mean many things. It can mean the cultural and social change, such as the Get Real project, but it can also be the political change, such as the kind of amazing incorporation of that film into the training materials for overseas domestic workers. But it also was a little bit unclear, I should say. This question kind of pushed people to assume that you know, an answer would not be viable unless you already had a campaign already in place. And I'm here to say, even if you see versions of this question still out there, if you're applying for Sundance Documentary Film Program grants, et cetera, that it's really important not to write about things that you haven't done. This question actually applies to, you know, what is your impact strategy and goals if you have determined them. I should say that if you're making a creative documentary or a documentary where you haven't actually determined these goals, my recommendation is to actually write that. You don't have to be fully developed in every aspect of the application. Because, for example, there's a second question on this version of the core application, which is grant impact. Should you receive the grant, how will the granted funds be spent, and how will they help you move forward with your project? So, for example, I've seen people be very honest and just say, part of what we will do is we will explore how we can create an impact campaign, or if that is even viable for our project, should we receive the grant, if that's something that you're really interested in. And then other places, again, where you can sort of put your plan about impact, or maybe it's only distribution. Maybe you're only interested in impact because it can extend the life of your film, because it can open up this community screening place. Then I would say then the question about distribution and audiences is actually where a lot of this stuff can go. So every few years we, so this is kind of, we do know that this is a little bit confusing, but the main difference also, and this is where I'm pointing out that, you know, the word impact has many meanings. Now we have this impact producing title, kind of this industry that's grown out of this mix of NGO work and policy work and international development work, and also documentary filmmaking. But it's, you know, in the US and in Western countries, I see oftentimes impact producing also being used kind of as a substitute for film marketing. And this is primarily from the streamers and the broadcasters. So they're also sort of creeping their way into this space, and it all makes it very confusing. But, you know, then at the same time, we have a question called grant impact, which is not about that, but like, you know, using the kind of more broader definition of the word impact. How will this change what you are doing? So because this is confusing, the current version of the core application does not have the grant impact question anymore, and has shortened the impact question down to a recommended 50 to 100 words. Describe your vision for the influence the film will have. If relevant, what are the impact goals and strategies for your project? For further guidance, please reference, as Gugi mentioned, the Impact Field Guide, which is the Doc Society and GIPA, the Global Impact Producers Alliance Field Guide, which is incredible. But the idea now, and this is a trend that I've also seen in grant applications, is to sort of shorten, because the fake impact campaigns that we were seeing as funders, where people were writing a lot about what the film could do, but it wasn't actually perhaps realistic or didn't actually match what the film was, it wasn't actually very useful for funders either. So now we really just want to know, in 50 to 100 words, it's like 5 sentences, you know? What have you already done? And how does that match with your film project? So, in my opinion, your impact goals and strategy should reflect the artistic treatment of your film, the stage of your project, and also your distribution plans. And what I mean by this is that if you are still in production on your project, and let's say it's a creative documentary, you know, it's not about imagining who perhaps the community screening partners are if you haven't done that work already before writing the application. If you have done that work already, it's worth writing out what you've done. for example, we have researched the potential community screening partners, and we've identified, 30, and when our film gets to this stage, we will contact them. But what's even better, if that's actually important to you, is to do that contacting before actually writing the applications. Then you can write, we've done initial outreach out to these community screening partners, and we have interest from X number of partners. And that's simply it. That's kind of, we just want to see where you're at. But if you haven't done that, that's okay. I would just say, just write that quite simply into this section of the application. Of course, the further along the project is, the more a funder might expect to see in terms of what you have done, but it should also match the distribution plans. So for example, the one thing I will say that kind of, in my experience, creates a little bit of tension is that the feature-length documentary can be very good for community screenings, but it can be very bad for actually incorporating into policy. If, for example, your goal is to create a piece of material to then show to policymakers to affect change, they don't have enough time typically to watch a feature-length film. So if that's the goal of the project, as a reviewer, what I'm looking for then is, okay, have you budgeted for, or do you recognize that you're going to have to cut down the feature-length film into perhaps a 30-minute segment or a 20-minute segment, and then that's what you're going to be sharing with policymakers. So I'm just looking for, do your impact goals match the artistic treatment of your film, match the stage of your project, and match your distribution plans. And if you say, no, this is an art gallery installation and we're not going to make a digestible version for community screening, that is fine too. I just want to read that, Okay. So if you want to read a little bit more about the core application, this is the website where the core application lives, or you can just Google Nonfiction Core Application Project, documentary.org. There's translations into Spanish. The whole thing is gives you a preview. Any of the major North American funders all use the core application. So this is a pretty good introduction to what that will look like if you're looking for grant funding. And then I do have an example, but I don't know if maybe you have questions for me first.
Yeah, maybe like some practical question. I think, especially, I think like you mentioned like really great points, like about, I think like be really honest, even though like you have this limitation of words. Because like this also like from my experience, like sometimes, we're gonna do like community screening for these 5 communities and so on. But also like the same time, as I said, I think like if it's like matched with the artistic treatment, like, this is like 3 hours film.
Yeah.
Like nobody
and no one's going to do it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And actually what I will say is the reason that both of you have mentioned, like, it can sometimes feel difficult because you're making a film and you're just trying to finish the film and you're like, I got to think about all this impact stuff on top of it. But I really do believe that when you think about impact first, like how Get Real was set up, it can actually really help you with the artistic development of a project too. So that's a great example, Gugi, because if, for example, you really do want to do community screenings with a creative documentary, then you can actually do the outreach to a community organization first, and they might give you the feedback. 3 hours is too long for us. We don't think that anybody will come. Then that can actually help you with the artistic development of the project. I would say usually it's not that kind of feedback. As a producer, I'm working on a project right now, and we were just doing research for the film, and we ended up getting in touch with like a Facebook group of activists on this specific issue. And we were talking to them about it. And they actually gave us so much interesting information. It actually helped us with the research of the film itself. So in that way, kind of us reaching out to what you might consider community screening partners, I think really actually helped with the development of the project and gave us a much stronger application just because we did that outreach to them first. So that's kind of why, to me, it's not a either or, it's kind of a both and, that this kind of work to prepare potentially for impact down the road, I think really can make for a stronger artistic project.
I would want to just say that, especially when it comes to a shorter version of the films, we've seen that happen with the film like Thank You for the Rain, because the 1 hour 30 minutes version would not be able to fly with especially TV stations. So you have to at times find that it's important to put the plan of cutting it shorter for TV stations and any other persons, especially if you want to go into schools too, because again, that is too long for students to sit back and consume.
It's longer than the class time, so
correct.
it's just not possible.
Yeah, so thanks for that.
I don't know if it's like still in the topic, but I think like when I show like also the trailer that like we specifically made this trailer just like to raise the fund as well, because I think like I think this is I think like the core idea, you always need like a different strategy like to do like something. So it means like to apply for funding for like from the NGO side, for instance, or that's why like we created like this trailer, because it's like more giving more information like what is happening with the film and so on. But at the same time, actually the film is like more poetic and like more slow. So this is like the way that like you can navigate yourself, like get through funding, because I mean to get also like the film fund now, it's really, really tough. Like you have to compete with a lot of films, and you can consider this part as well like as a funding alternative for you, because like a lot of actually international organizations or like NGOs, they actually have fund like to support like your project and so on. But at the same time, like you have to kind of be flexible with it, and then how far that you want to be flexible with as well, like to work with partner and so on.
I just want to double down on that point, because film funders, we receive a lot of applications for funding films. For IDA's Enterprise Fund, which actually has a very high barrier to entry, either the director or the lead producers have to have already finished 2 feature documentaries. So even with that kind of eligibility requirement, we still received 600 applications for 10 films to fund last year. We were turning away Oscar-nominated filmmakers who did not even make it past the first round. So film funders are overloaded on the amount of, I mean, Gugi, we were just talking at lunch about how many applications you receive for Docs by the Sea, the lab that in Docs ones. And, but NGOs who are more issue specific are not receiving 600 applications for impact campaigns or impact work with films about the issues that they are specific on. So if you are able to be flexible and you're able to understand their needs and maybe make a different version for them, or however this flexibility expresses itself, it can unlock kind of a less competitive pool of money.
Like really specific example, I think so I was consulted with this project, like who got also the production grant from the Open Society Foundation, and it's not like they don't have the open call and so on, but I think they like this project, like they convinced them like what to do with the film like afterwards, but their argument like, oh, but like we still like need to make this film, so like you have to give us like the production fund like to finish like the film and so on. So in this way, like you can always like go around the way as well, like to get your impact production, which is like a soft money as well. Like you can use it basically for everything. So in this kind of way, I think like you have like way more alternative like to get your funding for your project and so on. Any additional thought?
My final contribution again to this discussion was, I think, a bit of referencing that I did in my discussion. Nobody picked it, but I think it's important. We support independent filmmaking. We don't go for any kind of profiling or anybody. So when I mention, for example, a religious, for example, when I say the coastal side, which is Muslim dominated, it doesn't mean that we are profiling Muslims at all, because in the film that you watched, those I think were Christians. The one who was talking about abortion and going to Bagamoyo. So it's very, very important for one to understand that when we discuss with people, when it comes to DOCUBOX, we are a very open space. We are totally free spirits. We go with the independence of the documentary filmmakers, and we go all the way as long as nobody is infringing on another. So that's just important for us to know that there was nothing, we are here against nobody. Thank you.
Great. Do you have any additional thought before we throw to the floor so that we can have questions?
So you asked me to come with an example
yes,
of a impact campaign that kind of changed. So I don't have any fancy slides or a trailer, but I think it's a really good. So IDA funded a documentary called Another Body by the British filmmakers Sophie Compton and Reuben Hamlin. And this is a very interesting documentary because it is a kind of mystery thriller about two college women in the US who discovered that somebody had uploaded deepfake pornography of them online. And we're using this deep-faked pornography of them to basically threaten them through emails, so on and so forth. And they were trying to figure out who did it. Can this be a crime? Should it be a crime? They were just in college. And the filmmakers, when they were developing this story, they knew, because they wanted to protect the privacy of their protagonists, that they wanted, and also to illustrate the power of deepfake AI technology and how powerful and realistic, this can look now. They knew that they wanted to actually reapply technology that had victimized these two women to actually the telling of the film themselves. So in the film, the protagonists, also their faces are deepfaked. And the directors at the time, they were looking for other activists who were specifically advocating on this issue of deepfaked pornography affecting women. And so they at first were, in terms of impact, they were deeply embedded already in this community of activists who were already working on this issue, because they cast two of the activists to be the facial replacements for the protagonists of the women in the film. But because they were already deeply embedded in this community through the making, through the artistic treatment of the film, it meant that when the film was done, the impact campaign actually ballooned out to this incredible thing, because they were already working so closely with this community of activists. They have done congressional or legislative hearings in like 7 different countries, not just in the US and the UK. They've shown different versions to government, to policymakers, policy writers, offices. This is a thing that is not even a crime right now. And whatever you think about, using the criminal justice system for justice, but this is a thing that wasn't even classifiable. There was no, the film kind of ends with the two college-age women, they actually find out who's been doing this to them. They identify the perpetrator, and who actually also gets his face deepfaked in the film. And the police call him, but they can't do anything other than ask him to stop. So the film has also been used in many meetings for lawmakers, so on and so forth. But they were able to go this far to get meetings at the federal level because they were already working with activists so deeply. So that's kind of my example of something that there was not this super deeply involved impact campaign when they applied for IDA funds, and it actually grew much larger after they finished the film in a really beautiful way.
I think that's also the advantage, like if you kind of think about it, like in the earlier stage, you know, like you can just like put the seed first, and then I think like in the process that it will be easier and also like more like organic in a way, like to think about more like when you finish the film and so on. So I think that's like great example. We have several minutes, 9 minutes to be exact. So I'm gonna open like to the audience, like if they want to know more from us. Yes.
Just a little short question. If you are looking for different impact campaign places, is there a website listing up some of them? Or, I mean, you have 2 here, but or 3 here, but is there a place we can look for? Can you mention 3 others, for example?
Yes, so in Doc Society webpage, they have like several example, like how it's basically I think it was done beautifully as a video, like their outreach, their partners and so on. Things around like, for instance, like the the Australian documentary. They have this kind of like video report. They posted like also like in Doc Society webpage, and also like the Thank You for the Rain was also I think posted also in the Doc Society webpage. That like you can try like to understand like how the impact campaign plan was built and also like executed and so on. I wish that like we have
for sources of funding, so IDA has a grant directory, and there is a category for impact or outreach or distribution fund. But what I will say is that, again, you run into the same problem. There are a few funders that are specifically impact focused. In the US, for example, we have Perspective Fund, and that does fund, and then there's like Illuminate, which is specifically for South American-based. But these funds are very well known among filmmakers. So there will be hundreds of applications, and they will fund maybe 5 to 10 films a year. But it really is like for impact funding, it really is the non-film funders that impact really unlocks. And so those aren't listed on a website. That's due to, you know, your own research about what organizations are invested in the issues that your film is about.
I think what Gugi says also is very important. If you go into the Doc Society website and you look at the impact guide, apart from that, there is the impact team. Is it the global? GIPA, the GIPA one. You have quite a bit of information in that. It's called GIPA. It's called Global Impact Producer Alliance. Yeah.
GIPA.org. Anyone else? Yes, there are 2 here.
So I am involved with universities and teaching, and I have found universities and teaching to be a really useful source of funds for impact. So I've been able to embed my own projects in different university funding applications. And I've also found it a really useful source of having the films used in terms of making them a core element in a course. So then the films have a useful life, for instance, in the training of psychologists in one film, etc. What is your experience of working with the education centre, with universities and training colleges, and the funding that they're able to access?
I think my experience, so at Indocs we also have a program called like Vitamin Docs, which like using documentary for the classroom. So basically like what we are trying to do, like we create like the online platform. So we acquire 10 documentaries per year, like all over the world, and we form. I mean, we have the team of the curators team that consists of educational activists, teacher, filmmakers, and so on. But our idea is really integrating the film into the curriculum. So it means that like the filmmaker has to be flexible, like to cut the film into scenes and then like categorized by us, like to the climate change or human rights or and so weiter and so weiter. Sorry, my German, etc. And so like with university, I think in our region it's not that. I think it's not like really prominent. Like using audiovisual is still like really has to be initiated by like organization and so on. So, but it will be great like to get to know you better, like how you work in the university. I think it's really a good way as well, like to be. I mean, especially in the educational field, using documentary, for instance. Do you have any experience working with university?
I can just say it in a very quick manner. Even at the national level, we don't have a film fund. DOCUBOX is actually a fund that has been created because there was that big gap. So when it comes to education, one of our partners whom we work with closely has come up with a project which is called Tunga, which means in Swahili, create. And Tunga is creating a small niche area where documentaries can be used in classrooms to inform and to engage students in a deeper manner, because we keep on talking about trying to computerize our education systems, and yet at the same time we don't have enough materials. So we're trying to see if that will be most likely the entry of DOCUBOX and other documentary filmmakers into the education system. Yeah. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, I think like we kind of have like the same program like on this field. I think like also the idea like we created like the module like for the teacher as well. So like we created a module like what is like the discussion point like on this scene, for instance, and like what is like the homework for the students. So I think like we try like to facilitate maybe like more like educators like how to use documentary film, especially creative documentary, like to be included in the curriculum and so on. Yes. Last question. We still have 2 minutes.
Is there a chance that the intended impact is so big that will scare funders from working with you?
Mudamba,
I would say the bigger the impact, the better. I don't think there's any unless your funder is a politician and you're going to change the political stance of the country, and that would end up scaring that funder. But I think any funder would be happy to see that, for example, we usually say in DOCUBOX that try and promise less but deliver more. Because when you promise less and deliver more, it ends up becoming positive for you. So every time we're trying to work with maybe filmmakers and we go to the funder and say, we shall produce for you 3 films on this area, if we're able to squeeze and bring 4 films, the funder becomes more interested. So if we say, for example, the reach and the impact will end up meaning, as an example, if it is in numbers, will reach 200,000 students as an example, and you deliver to them 400,000 or 300,000, they are more excited and they want to work with you more. That's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think documentary itself is a form or like it's a medium like to change the narrative. Especially from the state, for instance, like if you're like living in the limited space of, or like limited civic space that you can like talk about it and so on. So and also like most of the funders, like they don't have, I mean, of course, like they have like this issue direction and so on, but like at the same time, they don't have like also like full editorial control. I mean, as filmmaker, like you always have to like negotiate with them, right? Like, I mean, if maybe like they try like to steer you up like to certain like the narrative that has I don't know, like really influencing your like artistic choice or and so on. Yeah, I think like the key is like collaboration, like but like in the same level. I think that's it. So like I don't think you will. I mean, if you want to change the world, of course, like people will fund you as well. Anyway, Abby, you wanna?
Yeah, I think just because I said before that I'm looking at about whether something's realistic, I think to me like your goal should be that your film changes the world. But how you articulate that, like let's say you're making a climate change documentary and you say, my film is going to stop climate change. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, that's amazing, but I don't think that's going to happen, right? But if you're like, you know, we're going to get this into the hands, like we want to stop climate change and to, you know, here's how I'm going to do it with this film. We're going to get into the hands of these people. We're going to specifically target this thing, which is a really big issue, so on and so forth. There's nothing too big there, I think, that any funder would recoil from as long as it's aligned with their values. So this is where it can be really useful to, if you get to that point in talking with a potential funder, to really sit down at that point and say, you know, what are your goals for the film? And then you just make sure that their goals and your goals match.
And don't forget that they are also like human, so you can always like negotiate. You know, like you can always like talk to them, like, okay, this is like my plan and so on. It's not that always like, okay, this is my impact campaign plan. Okay, no, and so on. But like you can always like negotiate with them, talk with them. This is like your plan. If it's like work, then it's good. So I think.
But if your film is able to stop climate change, don't you think the world will actually applaud you? I am just answering the question of if you over-deliver, we'll be happy. So the thing which you should do is don't over-promise, but when it comes to delivering, please try to over-deliver. It's okay.
Nice. That was like a good closing note, actually. We are out of time. Thank you so much for coming, guys. And I hope the session really helpful for you. We're going to be around like if you need like more. So I'm just going to give the floor back to Thanos.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Gugi, Peter, and Abby for joining us. Thank you all for being here. And again, I would like to thank our sponsors and partners, and especially the Hellenic Film and Audiovisual Center, Creative Greece, for making this possible, and Momus Photography Museum of Thessaloniki. Agora Happy Hour is starting next door, so all the Agora badge holders can join us for a drink, and you can hang out and talk further. Thank you again all for coming. It was amazing. Thanks.